Hey everyone, and welcome to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 3, Episode 23. It is called Sarek. So obviously we expected big things to get at this one, just because, hey, we got a character from the original series and popping in here. And they do kind of acknowledge how old he is now. He's over 200 years old. It's a big part of the plot. And the premise of this episode is that he is here to negotiate and it's his final task as well. He's planning to retire after this, or at least that's what the scuttlebutt is, as Picard and Riker talk about at the start of the episode. But he's there to negotiate with the Ligarans, and it's this big deal. And we never meet the Ligarans, we never even see it. It's all about the build up to it, the actual negotiations itself. You just assume, Sarek's good at what he does. We just accept that he's going to go in and do his thing. But the pickle here is that he has essentially Vulcan Alzheimer's is probably the closest comparison. Nah,
I guess it's not an exact.
No, but I mean, there's not anything specifically.
No, there's not.
They call it Bendai syndrome, and it's basically like bursts of emotions, and obviously Vulcans typically don't have much emotions. But the whole episode is about him being there on the ship, and they start to notice flares of rage bursting between various people, and we'll talk about some of the specific examples in a minute.
Some are rather comical.
Some are funny. Some are even more funny, and we'll get into that. But it's all about kind of dealing with the fact that he might not be physically capable anymore to do this negotiation, even though it's a really important thing for the Federation, and it's something that Sarek himself has been building to for a long time. In fact, that's why it has to be him, because he's built up a repertoire with these people. He's built a relationship, and they'll trust him to at least enough to get through this. So, yeah, that's just the episode. How did you feel about Sarek?
It's pretty good, isn't it? It's solid in that it manages to balance some very funny moments, with actually having some relatively serious plot beats in terms of likening it to Alzheimer's, that sort of old age essentially, and a person feeling like they can continue when maybe they actually can't.
Yeah, and there's a big thing in the episode about how he is in somewhat in denial, but at the same time he's also been shielded from a lot of the truth about how much the people around him. He's got a new wife who's also human, much like his first wife. He's got this sort of entourage. He's got like his personal assistant who's also Vulcan, but he's also got this I can't remember his exact job title, but the smarmy one who kept smiling and telling Picard to do things. And he's got these people, and they're kind of intentionally hiding this from him. They don't want him to know how compromised he actually is. Now, maybe they were going to tell him after this mission was complete, and they were hoping they could get through that. And it sounds like everything was going kind of smoothly, but the stress of this mission coming up actually meant that the other Vulcan, who was kind of suppressing his feelings with his male telepathy, it was starting to not work, and that's why all these flare-ups start happening around the ship. And I suppose we'll talk about those first and foremost. Let's work our way through some of these fun ones. Wesley Crusher got slapped, and you could see it coming, and that's the beautiful part of it, is you're like, she's about to slap him. She's about to slap him.
And on Wesley Crusher, he is insistent in this episode that he has a way with the ladies.
Well, I think there's almost a problem with Star Trek's mythology. This is a serious issue that we have to get down to here, because up until now, we have been, as you know, as I remind you at the end of every episode of this, when it comes to the ladies, Wesley Crusher's in complete control, and they've really stuck to that. That has been a cornerstone, a touchstone of the continuity and the character development of Star Trek, not just the Next Generation, but of the entire saga, right? And in this episode, Geordi drops a bomb on us. He says, compared to you, every other male in the ship is an expert with the ladies. I'm getting mixed signals here, and I don't know how to, up until now, I've been looking at Wesley Crusher here as something of a Casanova style of character, and all of a sudden I'm being hit with this idea that he might actually be a loser. And
no, here's the possibility. Geordie's he's flared up on Sarek's anger when this happens. Maybe it's not true. Maybe he's just saying that because he's bitter.
Maybe. I don't know, when he said,
or maybe we've been lied to.
When he said that I'll get more action out of my book tonight than you will out of this date, it felt true. Something about it felt true. so, that was good. So there was two genuinely good Wesley scenes, bizarrely. If I have
both of them with him being just put down in his place.
Yeah. Admittedly, if I have a complaint, is that the first one, which is because the time when they're fighting, and he says the thing about the expert and the ladies and all that, because they're working on like the Ligurians need this tank, and they're setting up the room for the negotiations. The first time it happens, it almost feels like it just goes straight to 11 out of nowhere. There's no like sort of like gradual tease of like a little bit of a temper somewhere or something. No.
It's straight in there.
Riker
has to come in and split them up.
Which isn't necessarily even a mistake in this or a critique of the script, because I mean, if the whole idea is that Sarek's having these flares of temper, that it wouldn't be a gradual build, it wouldn't be something that's rising like because obviously once stuff starts happening and then they notice that there's a problem. And Crusher's looking at everything. She rules out all the things that it could be in terms of a virus or something that's been transmitted between people.
That's whereas we're conditioned on this show to have the problem introduced in this episode, like a virus. Well, okay, so it gets worse as it goes on. Whereas in this episode, we're already coming in. The problem's at critical stage already as soon as it comes on board. Yeah, and that's unusual, I think, from at least different in the way it's presented here.
Yeah, it's different. I even think it's different from the show. It's just different from most TV, typically. And, usually it's not a complaint that the gradual thing's overused. It's just not. It's just a natural way to do most things. Whereas this, I mean, unless they're making a mistake and you can feel wait a minute, how did we build to this? But this actually has kind of a built-in reason. The more I learned about what was going on, it made more sense. But the first time it happened, it felt kind of like, oh, okay. Like, I get what it's doing here.
Extreme and out of nowhere. But in context, that is kind of how it's supposed to work.
And they do set up some good comic beats that come off of these. Of course, there's O'Brien in the in 10 Forward, and he's fighting this guy over a table. He's like, "Oh, this is our table. I didn't see your name on it." And Geordi comes in and tries to calm them down. "I'll get you drinks." And it cuts to Riker and Worf. And Worf, there's one offhand comment earlier on that Worf's put in like a insubordination report about an officer working for him. And so that's a serious claim, and Picard and Riker both know. I mean, that officer's been exemplary his entire time on the ship. And when he's talking, so Riker's talking to Worf, like, "You sure about this, Worf? Because it's a serious accusation." He's like, "No, he questioned my command." And it's even funny before they open the door, because Riker says, "Haven't you been noticing tempers a little bit flared up?" And Worf goes, "Can't say I have." And I almost took that as like a Klingon thing, where to him this is just things are feeling more normal. Yeah. But then they open the door and 10 Forward is just in
it's
chaos.
It's a full bar brawl going on.
Yeah. I actually, one of the little details that I appreciated here is that when all this ends and you get Picard down there with Troy and they're talking about what's going on, this is such a little thing. I appreciated that it was like the house lights were turned on and everything was really bright in a way that you never see this set. Because it really felt like, because normally in a bar you have X amount of lights, but when you're when after hours when the cleaning's going on or whatever, most places will have stronger lights that go on to so they can clean and see things.
You have lower lights for ambience and mood.
And I feel like we've never seen this set with this lighting, and I thought, that's actually a nice little touch that makes it feel more real. So
yeah, no, I agree. That was nice.
That's just a little thing, but it is what it is. So yeah, and of course Picard's all excited about meeting Sarek. He's met him once before when he was a youngin. He was a young, fresh, lieutenant or whatever he was at the time, and he's all excited about because he knows Sarek's like Mozart, and they've got Data doing a concert on his violin there with a little quartet to accompany him. Well, he's part of he's not accompanied by a quartet, he's in a quartet, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, which I think was 3 violins if I remember right.
I actually wasn't paying attention to what the instruments were, but yeah.
There was one, I think there was a cello, and then 3 violins, I think.
Well, you got to have one of the big ones for some bassier strings.
You do, yeah. I'm trying to remember now if maybe it was 2 violins and a viola. I can't remember.
Well, it would make sense.
It's murky.
I mean,
it would, but it's still an unusual setup.
I mean, I can't tell the difference between a viola and a violin just by looking at it.
The violas are a bit bigger.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. But they're close enough that I wouldn't just glance at it and know.
They're close enough that as a violinist, I've picked up a viola and can passably play a bit.
Yeah.
Whereas I couldn't touch a cello, for example.
Of course, yeah. Cellos. I mean, you hold it completely different.
Completely different beast, yeah. Whereas a viola I could get away with.
Yeah, it's like lining up a guitar and then try to do a bit of bass. It's like, okay, your fingers aren't quite used to those thick strings, but you can kind of get the basics because it's the same principles.
Yeah. You can passably do some sort of level.
Yeah, you could do some root notes at the very least, just to give us some.
Yeah.
Oomph. No one ever wanted to play bass though. Everyone saw bass as the demoted.
They didn't see enough cool bassists then.
Apparently, yes. But and because the big thing is that when they arrive on the ship, the Sarek doesn't come first. He sends the entourage comes first and explains that he does not wish to be disturbed. And Picard's a little disappointed because he's hoping to be able to talk to him and chew his ear off basically about his history and about his time in the Federation. And Sarek actually feels not as frail as they present him to be. They talk about him as if he's very very delicate and we can't do this. But when Sarek arrives, he feels like good old Sarek. He feels like, no, he's still got command of the situation. He feels like he knows what he's doing. But they kind of insist that he does this. But when they show him the meeting room where Wesley and Geordi are working on things, he's like, all the chairs have to be removed. This is, they're not going to like this. They're not going to like that.
It's very abrupt. And it's not severe enough right now that you think, this is, anger issues. It's more just, no, he's taking this seriously.
Yeah, it feels like he's a bit temperamental in his old age, but not necessarily to the point where...
Yeah, he's a little on edge, maybe. It's a big thing. It's his last job. He wants it to go well.
Yeah, but... so, they're not going to invite him, but then Troy kind of points out to Picard, like, hey, why don't you invite his wife, and maybe she'll talk him into it or something. And he does so. And... they just show up. They just show up at this little concert, and notably, there's some intrigue because Troy kind of notices some things in the empath side of things with the entourage. But the Sarek actually sheds a tear, and Picard notices this. And this is obviously a big deal. It's a Vulcan shedding a tear.
Yeah, by just something as simple as some music.
Yeah, being moved by music. Which is something I love music, and I will shed a tear at a movie often. Music on its own can't do it for me. That said, though, music that I associate from a scene in a movie can do it, but that's only because it has the association of the thing itself.
Fair enough. No, I've had it done from just music before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What one last thing on the violins? I noticed this because it stood out to me. Most violins will have some sort of shoulder rest, right? Just because it's an uncomfortable instrument to hold against yourself for too long.
Mm-hmm.
And you buy a proper one, like it's like it slots onto the edges, and it's like a little rubberized grip on the side with like a padded thing to put on your shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, what you do when you're just starting out playing is no one has that investment. If you start young, you're on a smaller size as well, so you'll upgrade at some point. You get an elastic band, and you put a piece of sponge under it and just tie it on with an elastic band. And there was one person in this quartet doing that, and it cracked me up. Like this professional quartet there, or as professional as it gets in this context, enough that he's playing this Mozart perfectly well with a sponge on an elastic band under his shoulder. It just cracked me up good.
I never even noticed that. Well, it's not something I'm trained to look for, so it never even occurred to me.
It was just something that caught my eye, and it took me back. It was something I did in like my first year of playing.
Well, I mean, Data's the one who's maybe good at playing the violin, so he's basically maybe taught a few other people to play some instruments in the last couple of weeks.
It's
they're all fresh.
That's quite a reach that in a few weeks they're going to be playing this, but sure.
They're in Starfleet. They're better than you. Just accept it. They are complete control of those stringed instruments. Wesley Crusher's complete control of the ladies, right? You can't relate to these people.
I'm calling some Geordie level bullshit on this.
But they have to leave because he's getting emotional, and eventually, the bar brawl kind of happens at this point, and they kind of have to accept the possibility that it is this rare Vulcan condition, and that he may have it. And Picard, and there's actually like a really tense moment where Picard and Riker start yelling at each other on the bridge. Again, they're being affected by the thing. It's not a real fight, but it does make everyone else feel awkward.
It was interesting because it was after, I think that was after Picard had said he hadn't been affected by it. So it was almost like there was this, it presented this idea that maybe some people are immune. Whereas this would, no, it's just random. Maybe this time it'll affect you, maybe next time.
So he goes in and he explains to Sarek's wife, we don't even see it. It just sort of cuts into the middle of the scene, and she's already heard the gist of it. And she's sort of like adamant, no, she's kind of denying it. But it becomes kind of clear that it is true. That And there's a point where Sarek comes out, he's overheard some of this, and he's wanting to openly talk about it. He's a logical being. He wants to hear the evidence, and he will, discuss it appropriately. But what's really exciting about this, obviously there's the little things like the entourage try to, I'll speak to Picard in private, and Sarek's, no.
Yeah, even like small things like how, so there is a test that they can take for this, but it'll take a couple of days, whereas the meeting's scheduled to take place in like 12 hours. And as soon as Sarek comes in, he's like, "Well, sure, I'll take the test," and because like it'll take a few days. He's like, "Yeah, that's so it is."
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that the scene ends up being extremely strong because essentially when they're left alone, Sarek eventually says, like, "Leave me alone with Picard. I wish to have this conversation." And as it goes on, we get to the point as he's getting more agitated through the scene, which again is particularly notable because he's a Vulcan. But he's getting more and more agitated throughout the scene as Picard keeps sort of like countering his arguments, giving him more reasons why he should consider this. And, it gets to a point where he just keeps kind of yelling illogical, and he's getting so frustrated, and he's shaking with rage almost because he can't argue against this, and he's getting very upset. And it's at the point where Picard's going to have to call this off, even though it's a really important negotiation. And then ultimately there's an idea, which is that they're going to mind meld, and this becomes kind of the big climax of the episode, is that Picard and Sarek will mind meld, the idea being that when they're melded together, Picard's mind will help Sarek control the emotions, or to put it more bluntly, in what we see of it, Picard kind of gets hit with all of the emotions as Sarek's able to go in and be himself, get the negotiations done. Because, we see Sarek go into the room, although there is notable a couple of little things here. He keeps calling Riker number one, just to sort of give you the little hint that there's a little bit of Picard, kind of...
The first moment where he just steps out and says no one, I was like, how much of this is Sarek and how much is Picard? Like, it was the way he said it.
Yeah. No, I think it's just a little Picard. It's mostly still him, but...
As it goes on, that becomes clear, but it was just that first moment. I was like, how intense was this mind meld?
But this is the thing, is that once he goes in, it cuts back to Picard, and he's just yelling and crying, and he's talking... And this was actually a really neat thing, because obviously we have Sarek in an episode, and it's kind of a big deal. We're season 3 of this show. We're 3 seasons into this, reboot, essentially, of Star Trek. And, they had, obviously, McCoy back in the first episode, and they've had little, callbacks here or there, but it's mostly stood on its own. And I think with Sarek coming into an episode, you have this natural expectation, is like, oh, is he going to bring up Spock or talk about anything, these big things from Star Trek? And I think... there's some restraint in that it's not just like talked about 10 times, because I think other shows would absolutely do that. Lesser writing would do
like
that.
A throwaway line here or there.
But there's very little in this episode, almost nothing about his family specifically, and Spock specifically. So I think it's very restrained, so that... This is the thing about nostalgia, right? And this is not purely just nostalgia, but the thing about nostalgia is that it can be overused, and it can be this detrimental thing where it's relied upon too much, and so on and so on. But there's something about it that when there's enough restraint to let us relax into knowing that they're not going to be shoving it down our faces, and then enough restraint that we're not expecting it every 2 minutes, and then you strike with one snipe of it, like with one acute snipe of it, it is actually very effective, because it works. Because it ties to something, and it makes it feel important. So, in the middle of this emotional sort of breakdown where Picard's kind of jumping from topic to topic as he's like dealing with all of Sarek's emotions, there's a little speech in the middle about Spock, about Sarek's regrets about Spock, and how he wished he could have told him he loved him, and something to that effect. It's like, it gets very kind of specific. And so when Picard says the word Spock, it hits in multiple levels. It hits because there's been very little nostalgia for things that Sarek's related to in the old show. It also hits because hearing Picard say the word Spock, when I don't think... has anyone said the word Spock in this show?
I don't think so. There's a throwaway reference to him earlier in this episode, but not by name. I think Picard mentions that the time he met Sarek was at his son's wedding.
Yeah. Which is an interesting little tidbit
in its own right. Yeah. But it's like I said, it's presented as a throwaway line, like, Spock, who cares?
Yeah. But I think the idea of like having this like emotional kind of almost closure to the Sarek and Spock relationship come through the voice of like Patrick Stewart as Picard is kind of this interesting way of tying the world together, where like having Picard reference like characters like that feels, especially when in this case, like, okay, he obviously knows who Sarek's son is, but he doesn't like he's never really, had a relationship with him or met him properly. But when he was at his wedding, I suppose. But like,
yeah, but this might have been just a lot of Starfleet was invited because Spock was a senior figure at that point.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like he was there on the core guest list who was there as part of the ceremony or anything like that. It's not like he was like a close personal friend.
And honestly, the way Picard talks about it, it sounds like he has a lot more, hero worship, for lack of a better term, for Sarek as opposed to Spock.
Yeah. So having him break down like this, so it kind of hit it hit the relationship that Sarek and Spock have had since the original series and the beats that they've had together in a way that it felt like, it was giving me this little slice of conclusion to their arc. Because if this is the last time we see Sarek again, and I'm not sure if it is, but it felt
it felt like it probably should be.
It felt like it should be. It felt conclusive in the episode. But if this is the last time we see of Sarek, it felt like an actual nice kind of send-off to, obviously, because the core thing we have with Sarek is that he's Spock's father. Like, he was introduced under the guise of being Spock's father. His importance in the original show and in the movies was always tied to Spock and tied to Spock's history and mythology.
It was. I really like the idea, though, that if this is his final appearance, and again, I kind of hope it is, that his first appearance was also there as a diplomat. He was brought on board, and we're kind of ending through that same loop for that. It's got this nice symmetry to it.
Yeah. So no, I think the use of Spock in this emotional beat as Picard's kind of like just unleashing all these emotions that Sarek has that are now coming to the, and I wonder like if part of the reason why this illness when it does pop up, because they mention it's not happened in Sarek's lifetime to another Vulcan, so it's clearly rare enough that it's not.
Yeah, they mention it's rare and it only happens to Vulcans who are over 200.
Yeah, which maybe a lot of them don't make. He's probably on the older side maybe. So
it's possible, yeah.
It's maybe the added effect to it is the idea that because as Troy in this episode even points out to remind us of this, is that it's not that they're incapable of feeling, it's that they made a point over generations of suppressing those emotions, of suppressing those things. And I think one of the things that any scene ever in any movie or TV show ever that talks about suppressing emotions, it's always like, no, you don't put it in a box because it'll grow and it'll fester and it'll become this thing that's bigger than it ever was and it'll eat at you. So the idea that he's been suppressing emotions for 200 years, like maybe that's why they're so goddamn strong when they start bursting out.
That's potentially part of it. I will say, I think in the mythology, here is Vulcans are very aware of how intense their emotions are, like more than humans, and that's why they suppress them, because they couldn't deal with it. It was too extreme. So I mean, it kind of works in, and I think there was something about Sarek being a relatively strong telepath, which is why he was projecting these more than maybe other people with the illness had done in the past. Yeah.
No. So it all works from that point of view. Obviously, Patrick Stewart's just putting on a poor performance as he's going through all these emotions. There's tears flowing from his eyes. He's it's him sitting in a dark room. I mean, Crusher's like sort of sitting by because she's there for medical assistance in case he needs it.
There was a point during this where it was close up on his face to start with, and when it pulled out, I wasn't sure. I thought maybe is this going to reveal like he's chained to the desk because he's like a danger to himself almost. Is the way he was acting, and really well. I mean, really powerful.
The initial cuts to him and he's like mid-scream, like his mouth's wide open and he's yelling or screaming when it cuts to him. So it's a really jarring, like, holy shit. We've never seen Picard act like this in any way, shape or form. This is so intense. Not him. Yeah, it's intense. Yeah. So no, it's very effective, and they have this solid goodbye at the end of the episode. Is they're leaving the transporter room. And Sarek says, I doubt we'll meet again, which again kind of alludes to the fact that this is maybe the goodbye kind of story. And obviously, I think Sarek did appear in the movies technically after this, but this is the end of the timeline because this is later in the timeline. So, and Picard says, I hope that's not true. I hope I do get to meet you again. And but he says, the best of us will be remembered in each of us. Like, we'll always kind of have that. The mind melding is kind of this personal thing. It's kind of a big deal when they do it. Like, they don't
there's still a connection once it's finished. It's not, oh right, that's it, done now.
Yeah, you don't just mind meld with any old tit because you'll regret it. You'll be connected to someone that you don't want to be connected to forever. So it's a very, very kind of emotional thing. So no, it's one of those things where they don't really bring it up, but you have to assume that he's mind melded with his wife at some point because that's like part of the personal bond, I assume, of being married.
I would have thought that is
Yeah.
probably a major part of Vulcan relationships.
Maybe even part of the wedding, perhaps. I don't know. Or maybe they saved that for the wedding. That's a thing they do. I don't know.
Maybe the traditionalists do.
That's very good. I mean, they still have sex, right? It's not like it doesn't
they have
replace
children,
sex.
so I'm assuming so.
No, this is an extra thing. We can't just compare it to sex because I'm pretty sure.
No, but I meant in the way that maybe this is the emotional equivalent for them. In that,
sure,
to them, sex is a very logical act. It's procreation. It's not enjoyment, right? Whereas maybe the mind meld is the emotional connection.
Sex for them is literally just slotting item A into item B, and just that's it.
It may well be, is all I'm saying. We don't know.
Yes, they would never refer to it as the whole of glory, is what you're saying.
I would suspect probably not.
Yes,
and maybe in Pomfar.
And I realize that that was a solid reference, by the way. I guess a good bit. Because it occurred to me what you just said after you said it. As a good callback. So anyway, I was going to say, yes, it occurs to me that very few people watch the comics podcast, or listen to the comics podcast, and also the Star Trek reviews. So me bringing up Whole of Glory randomly sounds so out of place and random.
That is such a niche crossover for our audience.
There was set up for that in a different thing, right?
There was 3 of you who got that, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes. So there you go. That's Sarek. That's the episode. It's a nice appreciation of a character to get a send off who, maybe won't get as much attention in like the movies where he's kind of more of a bit player to, all the bigger stars. But stuff with Sarek's really good. I liked him kind of having to come to terms, like comparing it to something like Alzheimer's or another aging related disease or condition. It really has that metaphor there that science fiction often does, and the way the characters around them kind of hide them from it. It is something that the Picard and that kind of just understand why they're doing it, but it's something they have to address. Picard does not feel comfortable about going to address this with them. He has to go and do it because he has to make sure this negotiation goes properly. If it can go ahead,
that's the moment where it actually affects him.
Yeah,
him and Riker is he doesn't really want to go and talk to him about this. Like I say, he kind of has this hero worship of Sarek and doesn't want to go and break his heart. But and Riker's like, no, you have to, and that's where they get a bit heated. Yep.
So, no, that stuff was all good. Plus, Wesley got slapped, which is always a good.
Two Wesley put downs in the same episode is generally, a very good episode.
Yeah. So there you go. No, it's a really solid episode. That is Sarek. So we'll look ahead at what episode 24 is going to be. We're getting actually quite towards the end of the season now.
Yeah, just 26, right?
Yeah, 26. Yeah. So we got 3 left. So, oh boy, oh well. So this next one can go either very good or very bad based on past experiences.
Oh God, is it a Troy episode?
When Deanna's mother.
Technically a Troy episode.
That's all I read when I said what I said. It was just Deanna's mother. Right, because we've had good examples of this, we've had bad examples of this. When Deanna's mother spurns advances made by a Ferengi, he takes it upon himself to kidnap the 2 of them, along with Commander Riker, and steal them away.
Wait, the 2 of who?
When Deanna's mother spurns advances made by a Ferengi. I mean, I listed the word Damon before, but I assume that's just the Ferengi's rank or whatever. He takes it upon himself to kidnap the 2 of them, along with Commander Riker, and steal away aboard a ship. I guess he means himself? I don't know. Anyway.
That's such weird wording, but okay.
The wording's weird, but I'm assuming Ferengi kidnaps Deanna's mother and Riker.
Oh, that could be gold.
Yeah, so...
Those 2 locked up for an episode?
Oh, God. A certain Wesley Crusher appears to be getting a proper uniform in this next episode.
That's a point. We had the return of the dress uniforms at the start of this one when they went to greet Sarek.
Oh yeah, we've established this before. They have this sort of more regal regalia.
It's one of those things that I kind of forget about because they use it so sparingly. But it's always nice that they've got it just in the closet ready.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you see police officers at a funeral or something. They'll have their full smart attire, which is not what they wear on the job day to day.
It'll be very impractical.
So there you go. I just noticed the title of the episode for the next one.
Go on.
I didn't say what it was before.
What's it called?
Menage a Troy. I got to. I zoomed in on the phrase Diana's mother. I didn't even know, because I usually say the title first. I never even noticed the title. Menage a Troy.
God. Oh, I'm kind of looking forward to it, and also terrified and dreading it.
Oh, this better be half as funny as it should be.
If it is as half as funny as the last good one with her, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm alright with a fun episode. But before maybe a couple of series episodes at the end, because it's the end of the season. I mean, the last one I know is for sure, but
yeah, and this was fairly serious.
Yeah,
we're in the last handful.
Yeah, this should be our last comedy focused episode of the season.
That's fine.
Let's go with a comedy bang. But yes, we'll see you next time. So of course, let us know what you thought of this Star Trek in the comments below. You can like and subscribe. Like is very important on YouTube, helps us out a lot. As does of course go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, where you can support us for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble. So go and have a look over there. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But otherwise, that's us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, and when it comes to the ladies, I am seriously starting to question if Wesley Crusher is in complete control.